let's say in the short term there's benefit, right? Let's say in the short term there's a little bit more exposure, maybe you go a little bit higher. Again, in your experience, how do you see that playing out over their junior career, and how does it affect their prospects of actually becoming a player? So, for example, I'm a 8th-round pick. I played for the Marlies. Maybe if I would have played in Windsor, I would have been a 12th-round pick. How much does that actually affect them as a player going through their junior career? Like, in your opinion, what do you see there?
Yeah. Well, I think it's totally short term. Like, I think it makes a difference, and it's really good for your ego to get drafted higher, to get like NHL too, right? You feel a lot better being a 1st or 2nd round pick than a 6th, right?
Yep.
So if you're shooting to get drafted as high as you can, and you hang your hat on that, then it's important. But I can tell you, and I don't have the lineup right now, but I'll just take like every team we play has several players that were picked later in the draft. Like I'm thinking on Guelph. Actually, can I take a second to look?
Yeah.
Okay, so here I got Guelph Storm, right? So we've got a 1st round pick, a 2nd round pick, a 2nd round pick, a 3rd round pick, a 2nd round pick, a 5th round pick, a 9th round pick, 1st round pick, 5th round pick, 2nd round pick, 2nd round pick, that's an import, 1st round pick, 3rd round pick, not doing us very good here, 4th round pick, 3rd, 9th, 10th, 14th round, 3rd round, and then the other 11th round. So we talked about this on a podcast before. So obviously there's your first 2 rounds, 3 rounds, typically, your top 60 rated player, more or less. So gives you at least a sniff. But honestly, you watch this. Like I said this earlier in the season, when you go to training camps and all of a sudden you see someone stick out like a sore thumb, and they were drafted late, and they sign, right? Like, so one of our guys, we got a few guys on our team. I'm not going to mention their names. It wouldn't be really that nice. No, it's nice actually. It's a compliment, but I'm not going to point them out. But like, they were 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th round picks. Like Jerv, one of our guys, 11th round pick or 12th round pick. You can make it. So I think short term, your ego says, "Oh wow, I'm a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round pick, 4th round pick. Like, got a chance to make it."
That roster there, it's probably like 2/3 top 3 rounds, and then a 3rd later.
Yep.
And it's like that's still a good crop of players on every team, because it's probably pretty similar every team.
Every team's got some really late round picks, a free agent here and there.
Right?
Like it happens all the time. When you go to camp, it's like, yes, like I'm not going to lie and say that if you're drafted, top 40, that your chances of making it are slim and none. No, your chances of at least signing are probably 90% if you're a 2nd round pick, right? It's what you do after it. And that's where you see, like in training camp, guys just, you can't help but keep them around, and then they play and perform. And you'll see a lot of guys that are late picks be really, really good players. So the point of where you play in midget is it important to get drafted? It might help you get drafted. But if your goal is just like we talk about all the time, the short term, if your goal is to get drafted and then you say, I'm a great hockey player after that, it's just one thing. Once the season starts, it really, I mean, the more I'm around it too, like the last few years, the more I see it's like it really, you have to perform. You really do have to perform. Yes, do some guys get a little bit of a leash? Yes, 100%. But you do have to perform, and if you're not performing, there's other guys that will, and it's clear as day. And I'm really adamant on that in the NHL draft. Right? Is you see guys signing at 19 years old, ELC, that's a entry level contract, and they weren't drafted. Like, how do you go through it? Right. So if you win a championship with whatever team, so last year it was in the OHL was Peterborough, does that make everybody get drafted? Like, you're more eyes on you. More eyes on you could mean good or bad, right? Depending on how you respond to that. So I think if you're looking at long term, like I always say this, you look at your draft or any success that you have, it's really good, but you have to make sure that you live up to it. And a lot of things that come into play there. It could be pressure. It could be, we talk about guys like all the time. They were just bigger and like in midget especially, or U16 we call it now. if you're just physically bigger and stronger, you can get away with a lot of things without having really good habits because you can just get away with it. But as you move on to those different levels, a lot of people go, "Look, what happened to him? He was so good." Yeah, he was drafted high, but his ceiling was almost met at that point. Whereas you get guys like you see it all the time. Guys just grow, um, 17 years old, and they grow 2 more inches, and they get a little bit bigger, and they're different players, or they understand that okay, I got to work so hard to just to get my next shift, and I got to practice hard, and they get in the gym more, and they do all these little things, and those little steps might seem like it's insignificant. We talk about this all the time, right? Is if you start you want to lose some weight, it's like everyone wants to lose it in a week, but when you go for lunch with your buddies and you have the burger and fries, it's like it doesn't seem like it's going to end like it'd be the end all be all decision, but it's one decision, and it's every decision you make adds up. So the kids that go in and they're later picks or free agents or whatever, they got to fight for every inch. And if they do it with the right attitude and they watch the video and they do all these different things and they understand the systems and they play it to a T, and all of a sudden they become really good players, it's not shocking. And it happens at every level all the time.
So we looked at, my voice keeps distracting me. We looked at I don't remember what it was. I think last week we looked at one. Okay, sorry, let me back up. I'm in a unique position at my age now where it's been about 10 to 15 years since all of the noteworthy players that I played with have now either had a career in hockey or not. So I have the benefit of, in my demographic, looking back and seeing who were the top guys, where did they come from, what did they do, and where did they end up. And so we did this last week. We looked at the top 3 teams in Ontario in my OHL draft year, which would have been 2010. And we looked through all 3 of the rosters of these 3 teams. So on those 3 teams, you got 15 players, 2 goalies. So that's 51 players over the 3 teams. There might have been like 7 or 8 that had a noteworthy career. Noteworthy being defined as made like an NHL career, or they made like a decent amount of money playing hockey, whether it was in Europe or whatever. There might have been 7 guys or so out of 51. Out of 51. Now, I guarantee you, I didn't look at this at the time that we were checking it, but I bet you each of those teams had 5 to 9 draft picks on each of those teams to the OHL, right? So it's hard to know that. Like, you can't know that when you're going through it. It's because you're in the middle of doing it, right? But it's important that you keep that context in mind, because to your point, is it about let's get drafted as high as possible, or do you actually want to be a pro? Because the correlation from draft to pro is still a very, very small percentage, and I'm sure it's more than the guy that was the free agent, but at the end of the day, that's not the end place is not get drafted as high as possible, So I still really believe if you move around place to place or you go to a better team because you think the exposure is better, I agree that it could help your draft prospects or whatever. But I really believe if you're good enough to get drafted, or good enough where people notice who you are, you'll be given opportunity, whether it's as a 3rd round pick or a 10th round pick or a free agent, and you'll just keep chipping away at it.
It's really hard to hide a good hockey player.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
I still believe that, even though like all this stuff about like the showcases and all that, there's truth to that to some degree. But I really believe like if you are good, like someone's going to give you a chance, someone's going to find you, someone's going to give you an opportunity, and then it's up to you to either take it or not. Because if you study you read off the roster of all the 1st to 3rd round picks on the team and how many of those guys they end up dying in junior. They die in junior. They play their junior hockey and they don't even go on to youth sports after. They don't even go on to any level of minor pro or whatever. And they were the top of the top going through junior, right? So it's important to keep that kind of stuff in mind when you're having these conversations at youth levels about we have to go to, Florida or Boston or Dallas or St. Louis to play the best showcase possible. It's like maybe it's helpful, but maybe it's unnecessary sometimes too.
It's so funny, like, and I don't know if you really get it until you have some actual experience, because, and I understand where parents and coaches think, okay, everything matters, and everything does matter. Like everything does matter, but everything doesn't matter. So what I mean by that is we're people are in such a rush, and would I be guilty of it? Yeah, probably to a certain degree, because you as a parent, you always want your children, even if you say, struggle is good and all that stuff, it's always good, but when it's you, it's different. Right? So if you get drafted, so like for example, my son was a high draft pick. So, you're just hoping that it goes okay. You get drafted, you get on the ice, you play, you get X, maybe X amount of goals, you get this kind of ice time, that would be good. Play on this line, that would be good. And then the next year should be this, and you're making a plan. Like everyone does it, right? And so if your first year doesn't go the way you thought it was, then I see people panic. Like, what the hell? It's the end of the world. It's like, no, like if you're 16, which my son was 15 at the time, it's 5 years. There's 5 years, right? Where you see a kid that comes in and it's like they don't, but like, so major junior hockey, OHL, CHL, whatever, like it doesn't really matter what type of player. Like you'll be the player around 18, 19, mostly 19. That's what the league is about. So we forget that 2-3 year gap of developing is like every little thing you do, the habits you create is what is going to make you the player. And but I see it, you know, um, and I was part of it with my family and the kids that my kid plays with. It's like you just want more for your kid, and you think it's unfair. Well, why is this guy getting that? And it's like it's a process, and it takes time. And like people do miss, like the scouting world misses things, or maybe things didn't go exactly to your advantage the first year or two or three. But again, if you're a good player, it works out. And here's what I mean. So off the top of my head, Logan Morrison. Okay. Yeah, so he'd be 21. He was an overage last year. So this guy had points, man. Played on the championship team and got traded to Ottawa for a pile of picks because he just puts up points, smart. And I was going, I wonder what's wrong because he hasn't got drafted. He was a first round pick in the OHL. He didn't get drafted in the NHL. Like he's putting up points, he's doing everything right. Why? Are they missing him? Well, it's not like he's not doing anything. He's putting up a ton of points. So why didn't he get drafted? Like, do you quit? Are things not going your way? Well, he finishes his overage career. Then he signs with, I believe it was Seattle. Like as soon as before the season ended, signed a contract with Seattle. Well, I guess it worked out.
Yeah, at 21.
But you can really
Right.
focus on I didn't get drafted, right? There's another guy, Cartier. What's his first name? Played in the Sioux. So he was like Charlie's underage. He was an overage. Same thing. Really good hockey player. How did he go undrafted? Signed with Seattle. Arbor Jack guy. Your time comes if you're a good player. So I think going back to your point about competition and all that stuff, it's so easy, and I get it. Like you get it, I get it. When you want things now, you want things to go right. That's what you want. But the short term is actually doesn't make that much of a difference. It's only like for your own ego.